We're going to go straight to Rambam. And it's interesting. There are times that with various Jewish practice things that Rambam, whatever he says, it's just sort of there and it doesn't really change things. One instance is getting drunk in Purim. He says something that's pretty normal. It's pretty there. It's only other rabbis who really try to do dynamic and novel things. He's not novel in that sense. This is really fascinating. What he does here in text 6 and 7, he says for text 6, one of the things that prevent a priest from reciting the priestly blessing is wine. He says wine, right? Wine, this beverage we all have in front of us. And then he goes more into it in text 7. He says, what is this? He says wine. What's implied here? V'yayin kitzad. A priest who drank a revit of wine in one gulp should not recite the priestly blessings until the effects of the wine wear off, since this is an association that was established between reciting the blessing and service in the temple. Now, should a priest drink a revit of wine on 2 different occasions, or mix a small amount of water in it, he's permitted. If he drank more than a revit, even though it was mixed with water, or even though he drank it intermittently in multiple sips, he should not receive the priestly blessings until the effects of the wine wear off. It's fascinating. One might say, where's he getting this from? This quantity rubric. So it seems to be, we have in these, what I have lovingly called this Talmudic sources for Maimonides, because he's bringing in these other Talmudic passages that are not what we saw. So with text 8, this has to do, going off of Leviticus 10:9, Aaron mentioned the priests have this explicit prohibition against serving under the influence, and they have this quarter log, like this revit. For future reference, we'll just say 3+ ounces if we want to help in our own minds. We also have in text 9 this revis thing, which you need time for it to dispel, which has really only to do with providing halachic guidance. I'm not really sure where he got this notion of the multiplicity. Maybe that's somewhere else, but if you have it in 2 gulps, you're okay, but 1 is off limits. It's really interesting. Maybe it just has to do with sort of like what we see here in text 8 about the notion of what are you drinking? How are you drinking it? If it's just the wine, maybe that will be in a manner in which that will get you drunk, but diluting it with water or spacing it out will be less impactful on your ability to then provide the priestly blessing. A little bit novel, right? No one else has stated these stipulations. This is Rambam's own creative rubric, really. And I will say, to his credit, because what we saw in that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, quoting Bar Kapara, he says wine is off limits because wine is off limits for the Nazir, and there too, it's also going to be off limits for the priestly blessing. Although the amusing thing is the rabbis are just so... By the way, I mentioned to you Leviticus 10:9 is the first appearance of beer. The second appearance is actually number 6 by the Nazir, although the rabbis just sort of sidestep the beer aspect and they just say it's all about wine. So they get really fixated on wine. Rambam here talks about wine. Wine is the issue. Wine prevents priestly blessing. I think he's right. Rambam's really more interested in the intent here, because the second sip, it could be a second and a half. It's not a huge time gap. It seems to be more about intent. But really, I think really what comes out of this is he's cobbling this together whole cloth, this whole structure, and he's doing it, for lack of a better term, in a Frankensteinian way. Like, he's taking disparate parts from different parts of Talmudic passages and trying to put them together here, rather than just saying, one thing he could have done is just to I don't know, paraphrase, maybe not directly quote what we saw in the Talmud was, once you have wine, it's off limits. And he's at least trying to provide outs or loopholes to enable kohanim, despite having some wine, to nevertheless still be able to provide that blessing.